I remember a case in my medical training where there was somebody that came in and he was overweight and he just couldn't stop coughing. And he just kept on coughing and coughing and coughing, and it got to a point where it was difficult for him to do a lot of things, go to work or just really perform what they call the activities of daily living. And he went to a lot of different providers, a lot of physicians, specialists, and they thought he had, asthma, gave him some inhalers, and they gave him a lot of other treatments, antibiotics. They thought he was sick, and then it just kept on getting worse, and it kept on getting worse, and it kept on getting worse, and it got to a point where they thought, hey, maybe he has COPD. He's never smoked a day in his life. This is something that maybe has pulmonary fibrosis, which is your lungs sort of get clogged up. Can be an autoimmune kind of thing, and it got to a point where it was so bad that this guy, they thought maybe he needed a lung transplant. It was just something bad that it was like almost like an episode of House. I don't know if anybody has watched House. I used to watch it in medical school to really inspire me to study, because you start off with a really complicated, and the goal was if you can within 10 minutes figure out what the diagnosis is before we get to the end of the show, then you'd win the game. So with this guy, this was real life. This is not House. He kept on coughing. Got worse, and ultimately, ironically, they had a medical student sit with him for an hour because he was in the waiting room. He said, this would be good training for this person to go and interview this person and really get his history, because it's complicated history. And the medical student sitting with him for a long time, asking about, hey, how's your family? What's your situation? What's your past medical history? And it turns out this person, he was a janitor, and he would clean bathrooms, he would clean a lot of other facilities, and he was using a lot of chemicals, a lot of bleach, a lot of other things, and he was mixing them together. They're creating fumes. And turns out, at the end of the day, it was because he was sensitive to some of these fumes, and that was causing his cough. And it took about 3 years for somebody to figure that out, and also a medical student to figure that out. And the end of that story is he got rid of all these chemicals, laid off the line of work for a little bit, a couple months, and his lung function returned to normal. It was miraculous. He didn't cough, he didn't have any of these symptoms, he didn't need all these expensive inhalers, definitely didn't need a lung transplant. And that just shows that a lot of times something that's obvious, should have been obvious, is overlooked because the medical profession is so busy. Somebody comes in with a cough, all right, you're probably sick, or if it doesn't get better, maybe get you tested, maybe you have asthma, maybe you have COPD, fit you into a box, here's an inhaler, I only have 15 minutes with you, and then I got to see the next person. So not being able to take the time to really understand somebody's situation can cause a lot of harm in this case. I mean, imagine if the guy got a lung transplant. I mean, that's a huge procedure. You got to go through immunosuppressants, and a lot of times, life just never becomes the same after that. So in this case, luckily, it was prevented because somebody sat with him for an hour, and it didn't require significant training. In this case, he sat with a medical student who was very earlier on in her training, and also the cost of all of that, right? How much cost could he have prevented? Inhalers are not cheap. Usually they're at least $30, $40 on average in copays. If you have a deductible, these inhalers are a couple $100 retail. And then also all the tests, all the scans, all the time missed from work, and being a product of the system instead of being a customer. So that's why a lot of physicians are waking up to the fact that you really need time with somebody to understand their situation. And unfortunately, a lot of people are losing trust in the system because they feel like they're not being heard. it just comes in, and it's almost like a patient is a product instead of the person being served. We look at social media, we look at a lot of these free services out there. I'm not saying medicine is free, it's sort of the opposite of that. But a lot of times we feel like, if you go on Facebook, social media platforms, you're the product. You're the data that's being sold. And a lot of patients feel the same way about healthcare, which is they're a way to really funnel money from employers or the government through health insurance, Medicare, and so forth, into the pockets of providers and pharmaceutical companies and so forth. And the intermediary is the insurance companies and people that handle the payments. So it's people feel like they're a cog in the system, even though they should be the customer in the system. So I really think that in order for us to change medicine, we have to give doctors a structure where they can spend more time with patients, and patients need to be able to advocate for themselves. And we're seeing a lot more patients use AI because they're saying, hey, look, at least for AI, I can ask follow-up questions. With my doctor, they're rushing me out the door. And unfortunately, if we let this trend continue, we might not have much of a medical system that works, even less functional than we have today. So that's why sitting with somebody for an hour, really understanding their situation, is a critical path to regaining trust in medicine and being able to have a structure and have a practice that's able to do that with you as a patient. I think that's going to be a differentiator in the future.